Shaka, the Zulu warlord, is one of the more remarkable characters in our history. Much of what we know of Shaka is the stuff of myth and of legend. It's one of the truths that when a person is a little larger than life, then all kinds of attributes are attached to him that might not necessarily be accurate. In the early 19th century, Zululand, or KwaZulu, becomes an area of violence. What caused the violence? We don't know. It could have been a spread of the slave traffic from Delagoa Bay to the north. Could have been great droughts. Might have been a combination of the two. We know that Shaka, who'd been born somewhere in the 1780s, is born into times of trouble. By then, the Nguni tribes were splitting themselves and forming alliances, and Shaka ultimately would ally himself with the Mtetwa people. In the early 19th century, 1810, 1815, all hell breaks loose. And we don't know really why, but it would seem that the black peoples who had for many, many years been moving every time their herds of cattle was too much for the grazing, they would move to fresh grazing. But by the time they'd settled the east coast grasslands of southern Africa, there was no more grazing. And if you had too many cattle and your cattle started dying and you needed fresh grazing, you would need to take your neighbors. And of course, this leads to problems. The neighbors will flee, and a knock-on effect is created. And we enter into a period called the Mfetana, a period of great violence. The loose translation of that is the crushing, and it spreads over a vast area, and thousands of people will die. Shaka had, in the meantime, become illegitimately the chief of a fairly small clan called the Zulu. And possibly one of Shaka's attributes that is not picked up on so much is that he must have been a very shrewd politician, for he manages to keep this little clan out of the violence that is raging around him, and in fact becomes seen as a place of refuge. And as people from these shattered tribes flock to Shaka's banner, he uses his instinctive natural abilities to create, in the words of some historians, one of the greatest war machines the world has ever seen. They put Shaka up there with people like Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Alexander. In fact, he's called the Black Napoleon. Shaka changed the accepted methods of resolving conflicts, which was really the arbitrary picking up of whatever was available and throwing it at your enemy. That didn't work for him. And he develops a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear, the assegai. The assegai really was a short sword. Cast your minds back. What great warrior nation achieved much of its success with the short sword? Well, it was the Romans and the gladius. And the ikla, or the assegai, will do exactly the same. He supplements that with war clubs and an iron and ruthlessly imposed discipline. And these hitherto peaceful Nguni people will become rigidly regimented by Shaka. He will create battle tactics. They didn't vary very much. It would become known as the horns of the buffalo. It is built around a solid phalanx of infantry that were drawn up in rank after rank, shields to the fore. Remember the Macedonian phalanx that carried Alexander to greatness. This savage king seems to work out all of these things without help from history. The plan, very simply, was that as they were drawn in and clashed with the front line of the shield wall, the warriors on the flanks, at the shout of "Abapagat Nina," meaning they're inside the trap, the younger warriors would leap out of concealment in the grass or the gullies, and they would run. And when a large body of men runs, after a while it forms a fairly distinctive wedge shape, with the fastest in the front and the slowest at the back. Well, the Zulus had no inkling of a wedge, but they knew what a horn was, and the shape is much the same. And essentially the horns would run, surround the enemy, the tips would meet, the enemy would be forced to fight on all fronts, and ideally, from the Zulu perspective, be destroyed. Shaka will rule Zululand for only 13 years. During his time, the Zulu Empire will spread from the normal confines of what used to be KwaZulu to a reasonably large area. But eventually, like many warlords, his excesses of violence would in fact be his undoing. And in 1827 on the death of his mother, with whom he seemed to have a unique relationship. He is so incensed with grief that he orders executioners to spread around Zululand and to murder people indiscriminately, to make certain the whole nation was in mourning. His aunt, an old Harridan, called him Kabai, who interestingly, back in 1813, had engineered his ascension to the Zulu leadership, decided enough was enough. And with the assistance of two of his half-brothers, they began to hatch a plot. It took them the best part of a year before they managed to catch Shaka by himself. And the two assassins, together with Shaka's arms bearer who'd been drawn into the plot, sweep down, and in a few minutes it was over. He's reported to have said, as he lay dying, "Why are you killing me, my brothers? You will not reign for long, for the swallows are coming." What he meant by that was the people who build their houses from mud, the white people. And indeed he was right. His brother Tinga would be the man who would have to deal with the white Calvinist settlers moving up from the Cape. But that's another story. Today, the Zulu people, who constitute the largest single group in South Africa, retain the pride of their forebears. Their home is in this province, KwaZulu-Natal, and there is much to see. One can visit their battlefields, see their triumphs and their losses, see how they rose to power and how they fell from it. We brand this province the Zulu Kingdom. Come and visit us. Let us take you to these places. Experience the Kingdom of the Zulu.